I sliced the roast beef perfectly unaware that my daughter was about to uninvite me from my own life. It was a typical Sunday evening at my house. Since my husband passed away 3 years ago, I had made it a tradition to host my daughter Jessica, her husband Brian, and their 2 kids for dinner every weekend. I cooked, I cleaned, and I usually paid for whatever they accidentally forgot to buy during the week. We were sitting around my dining table. The kids were quiet, focused on their iPads, while Brian scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging the meal I had spent 3 hours preparing. Jessica was animatedly talking about the upcoming summer. For months, we had discussed renting a large cabin by the lake. It was supposed to be a family tradition, renewed a way to keep us all connected. I had already mentally packed my bags and purchased new fishing gear for my grandson. I passed the potatoes to Brian. I was looking at the hiking trails near the lake. I said, genuinely excited. I can't wait for our vacation. I think the boys will love the North Trail. Jessica paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. She glanced at Brian, who didn't look up from his screen. Then she looked at me. A small, patronizing smirk touched the corners of her lips. "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. About that. We decided we need some core bonding time, just the 4 of us. Plus, Brian's parents are coming up for the weekend. It's only for family without you. The room went completely silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even the kids seemed to sense the shift in the air. I looked at Jessica's face, waiting for the punchline, but there was none. She meant it. Brian finally looked up, giving me a tight, unapologetic nod. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't ask why Brian's parents counted as family, while I, the woman who had just served them dinner, did not. I just nodded slowly. I picked up my water glass, took a sip, and looked right into my daughter's eyes. I knew exactly what I had to do next. After they left, I didn't waste time weeping over old photo albums. Instead, I went straight to my home office and booted up my computer. Understanding how Jessica and Brian operated required following the money. 2 years ago, Jessica had convinced me to open a joint checking account. She called it the Family Fund. The premise was simple. I would deposit a set amount every month and they would contribute what they could. It was meant to be a safety net for emergencies, home repairs, and supposedly family vacations like the lake house we had just discussed. I logged into the banking portal. The screen illuminated the quiet room. The balance sat at a healthy $8,400. I clicked on the transaction history, adjusting my reading glasses. I had always trusted Jessica to manage it, rarely checking the line items. Tonight, I looked closely. My monthly deposits of $800 were there, reliable as clockwork. Their deposits, however, were sporadic and tiny. $50 here, $100 there, sometimes skipping months entirely. But the withdrawals, those were consistent. There was a $300 charge at a high-end golf shop, a $250 charge at a day spa Jessica frequented, countless grocery runs, gas station fill-ups, and restaurant bills. The most revealing charge was from 2 days ago, $400 to a premium wine delivery service shipped directly to Brian's parents' address. I leaned back in my chair. They weren't just excluding me from the vacation. They were actively using my money to fund a trip for themselves and my in-laws. I was not a mother to them anymore. I was an ATM with a heartbeat. I had allowed this dynamic to develop out of a misplaced desire to feel needed after my husband's death. I thought my generosity would buy their inclusion. It had only bought their entitlement. I closed the laptop. My chest felt tight, not with sorrow, but with a cold, clear realization. If I was not part of the family, I certainly did not need to fund it. The bank opened at 9 in the morning. I would be their first customer. Monday morning arrived crisp and bright. I dressed carefully, opting for a tailored blouse and slacks. I felt completely calm. There was no anger clouding my judgment, only a deep sense of purpose. I walked into the local branch and sat across from a young teller named Marcus. I handed him my ID and the debit card linked to the family fund. I need to make a withdrawal, and then I need to remove myself from this joint account entirely, I told him, keeping my voice steady. Marcus clicked away on his keyboard. Certainly. How much would you like to withdraw? I had done the math before leaving the house. Out of the $8,400 currently sitting in that account, my contributions over the last 6 months alone accounted for $8,200. I will take $8,200. Please transfer it directly into my sole checking account. Leave the remaining $200. Are you sure you want to be removed from the account? Marcus asked, looking slightly concerned. Once you're removed, you won't have access, and the remaining account holders will have full control of the remaining balance. That is exactly what I want, I replied. The process took less than 15 minutes. I signed 2 forms. I watched the screen as the funds moved from the joint account back to where they belonged. I didn't close the account entirely. That would have triggered an immediate notification to Jessica. I just quietly stepped out of the financial arrangement, leaving them with exactly what they had contributed. I walked out of the bank and tossed the joint debit card into a public trash can on the corner. The sun felt warmer on my face than it had in months. For 3 years, I had bent over backward to accommodate their schedules, their preferences, and their financial shortfalls. I had let my home become their free restaurant, and my bank account their personal slush fund. They wanted a vacation without me. They were about to get exactly what they asked for. The payment for the lake house rental was due on Friday. I went home, made a cup of tea, and waited. Friday arrived. I spent the morning in the backyard pruning my rose bushes. It was meticulous, quiet work that required thick gloves to avoid the thorns. It felt appropriate for the day. At exactly 11:15 a.m., my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message from Jessica. Mom, did you do something to the card? I'm trying to finalize the booking for the lake house and it keeps declining. Call me ASAP. I placed my gardening shears on the patio table. I stripped off my gloves and wiped my hands on my apron. I didn't call her. I waited exactly 3 minutes to let her anxiety build. Then my phone rang. I watched her name flash on the screen, letting it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, another text arrived. Mom, the rental company is going to give our week to someone else if I don't pay the $6,000 balance right now. Why is the card not working? I stood looking out over my garden. The roses were blooming beautifully this year. I opened the message thread. I typed my response slowly, ensuring every word was correct. I didn't want to leave any room for misinterpretation or argument. I hit send. At family dinner, I said, I can't wait for our vacation. You smirked. It's only for family without you. I just nodded. You tried to withdraw $6,000. I blocked the card. Pay without me. I turned my phone on. Silent, slipped it back into my pocket and picked up my shears. I had 3 more bushes to trim. Within 10 minutes, the peace of my backyard was shattered by the sound of tires screeching into my driveway. A car door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Footsteps stomped aggressively down the side path toward the garden gate. Jessica pushed the gate open. Her face was flushed red, her phone gripped tightly in her hand. The storm I had anticipated was here, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the rain. Jessica marched across the lawn, dodging the sprinkler head I had set up earlier. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, shoving her phone toward my face. You emptied the account. The rental agency canceled our reservation. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? I snipped a dead bloom off a stem. I transferred my money to my personal account. The remaining $200 is yours to spend as you please. Your money. It was the family fund. We had an agreement, she yelled. I finally turned to face her. I didn't raise my voice. The agreement was that the fund was for family. On Sunday, you made it explicitly clear that I am not part of your family vacation. Therefore, my money is not part of it either. Not part of it. You're being petty, Jessica snapped, crossing her arms. Brian's parents are coming from out of state. We just wanted some space. You see the kids every week. You're suffocating us, Mom. And now you're punishing us like children. I'm not punishing you, I said calmly. I am respecting your boundaries. You wanted a vacation without me. I agree. You should have one. But you are adults. Adults pay for their own vacations. I am not a travel agency. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. She was used to me caving, apologizing, and writing a check to smooth things over. Brian is furious. She tried using her husband as a weapon. He said if you do this, you might not see the kids for a while. It was a low blow designed to hit my weakest point. But my perspective had shifted. If you and Brian choose to use my grandchildren as leverage because I won't pay for your in-laws' lakeside retreat, that speaks to your character, not mine. Fine, Jessica spun around. Keep your money. See how lonely you get. She stormed back to her car and drove away. The silence returned to the garden. I picked up my watering can. It was over, and I felt nothing but relief. For the next 4 days, my house was wonderfully, utterly quiet. I didn't cook massive Sunday dinners. I didn't clean up scattered toys. I read books, went for long morning walks, and actually watched the television shows I liked without interruption. Then the guilt trip began. It started subtly. Jessica sent a photo of my 6-year-old grandson Leo looking crestfallen on their living room floor. The caption read, "Leo is crying," because we had to tell him Grandma ruined his summer at the lake. It was a manipulative tactic, and it made my stomach turn. I loved my grandchildren fiercely, but I recognized exactly what Jessica was doing. She wanted me to break to feel so guilty that I would transfer the money back and beg for their forgiveness. I didn't engage with the bait. I simply replied, "Give Leo a big hug for me. I'm sure you and Brian will plan something wonderful for him." She didn't reply. That afternoon, I walked into my home office and looked at the calendar on the wall. The week they were supposed to be at the lake was wide open. For years, my schedule had revolved around their needs. If I wasn't funding their trips, I was babysitting while they took weekend getaways. I opened my laptop, but this time I didn't look at bank statements. I went to a travel website. I had always wanted to see the coastal towns of Maine, to eat fresh lobster and watch the boats come in. My husband and I had talked about it, but we never made the time. I found a beautiful, highly rated bed and breakfast overlooking the ocean. I booked a premium room for 10 days. I paid for my flights. I booked a rental car. I used the money I had withdrawn from the family fund. When the confirmation emails chimed in my inbox, I printed them out and placed them on my kitchen counter. I was done waiting for an invitation to my own life. I was making my own plans. The following evening, the doorbell rang. It wasn't Jessica this time, it was Brian. He stood on my porch holding a cheap bottle of wine, wearing his reasonable businessman expression. "Grace?" He smiled warmly. "Can I come in?" I opened the door and let him step into the foyer, but I didn't invite him to sit in the living room. "What can I do for you, Brian?" He handed me the wine. "Jessica is really stressed out. You know how she gets. I think things got a little out of hand on Sunday, and we'd like to just hit the reset button." "A reset button," I repeated. "Exactly," he said, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Look, we understand you felt left out. We could have handled the delivery better, but we really need that lake house trip. The deposit is gone, but we found a smaller place. We just need a temporary loan of $4,000 to secure it. We'll pay you back, of course. I looked at my son-in-law. This was the same man who had let me cook, clean, and fund his life without a word of genuine gratitude. "Brian," I said, placing the wine on the hall table, "you bought a new set of custom golf clubs last month. You paid for them using the account I funded." He shifted uncomfortably. "That was for networking. It's an investment in my career." "And the wine delivery to your parents?" I asked. "That was a gift," he muttered. "My answer is no," I said firmly. "There will be no loan. But while you are here, I need something from you." I held out my hand. "My house key. The spare one Jessica keeps." Brian's face hardened. The friendly facade dropped instantly. "Are you serious? You're locking us out." "I am securing my property," I corrected him. "You are welcome here when invited, but you no longer have free access." He pulled the spare key from his keychain and dropped it into my palm. He didn't say goodbye as he walked out into the night. 2 weeks passed. The tension settled into a cold war. I hadn't heard from Jessica or Brian, which suited me fine. My suitcase was packed and waiting in the hallway. My flight to Maine was scheduled for noon. At 9 a.m., a car pulled aggressively into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Jessica getting out, dragging 2 small suitcases. My grandsons Leo and Sam tumbled out of the back seat. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. "We found a cheap resort 2 hours away," Jessica announced, marching up the steps. She didn't look at me, just pushed the boys forward. "It's not the lake, but it's something. It's adults only, though. We'll be back on Sunday." I packed their lunches for today. She assumed nothing had changed. She assumed that despite everything, my house was still her free daycare facility. She expected me to just take the boys, swallow my pride, and let her walk away. I crossed my arms. "I cannot watch the boys, Jessica." She stopped midway down the steps and turned, glaring at me. "What do you mean you can't? You're always home." I gestured to the window. Through the glass, my large blue suitcase was clearly visible in the hallway. "I am leaving for the airport in 20 minutes. I am spending the next 10 days in Maine." Jessica's mouth dropped open. "Maine? Who goes to Maine? Who are you going with?" "Myself," I said. "I booked a vacation. Since I was excluded from the family trip, I made my own plans." "You can't just leave," she shrieked, her panic rising as she realized she had no backup plan. "Everything is non-refundable. What am I supposed to do with the boys?" "You are their mother," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I suggest you figure it out. Have a safe trip wherever you end up." A yellow taxi pulled up to the curb behind her car. I gave my grandsons a quick, tight hug. "Grandma loves you. Be good for your mom." I grabbed my suitcase, walked right past my stunned daughter, and got into the cab. The Maine coastline was exactly as I had pictured it, rugged, beautiful, and completely indifferent to human drama. The air smelled of salt and pine. For the first few days, I kept expecting my phone to ring with some new emergency, some new demand. It stayed silent. I had finally stopped playing the game, and consequently, the game had stopped. I spent my mornings drinking coffee on a wooden deck overlooking the Atlantic. I took long walks along the rocky beaches, collecting smooth stones. I joined a local guided tour of historical lighthouses and struck up a friendship with a retired school teacher from Ohio. We ate lobster rolls at small roadside shacks and laughed until our ribs ached. One evening, while sitting by the fireplace in the bed and breakfast, I briefly checked social media. Jessica had posted a photo. It wasn't an adults-only resort. It was a cramped indoor water park hotel. The caption was a passive-aggressive masterpiece trying to make the best of a stressful summer. "Real family sticks together through hard times." I studied the photo. Brian looked exhausted. Jessica looked miserable. The boys looked thrilled, covered in chlorine and eating overpriced pizza. A month ago, seeing that post would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. I would have worried about their finances. I would have sent a text offering to pay for a nice dinner out. Now I just scrolled past it. Their stress was a product of their own choices, not a result of my failure. I closed the app and put the phone in my purse. I didn't need to check on them anymore. I didn't need to fix their problems. I ordered a glass of red wine, leaned back in my comfortable chair, and listened to the sound of the ocean crashing against the shore outside my window. I hadn't felt this light, this completely free in decades. I returned home physically refreshed and mentally fortified. The house smelled a little dusty, but it was mine. No unexpected guests had rummaged through my fridge. No extra laundry was piled on the sofa. 3 days after I got back, my phone rang. It was Jessica. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello," I said pleasantly. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her tone was entirely different. The entitlement was gone, replaced by a cautious hesitation. "I saw you got back. How was Maine?" "It was beautiful," I replied. "Very restful." There was a long pause. "Listen, Mom, Brian's car needs a new alternator. It's pretty expensive. We're really strapped after the water park trip. I was wondering, could you help us out, just this once?" The old Grace would have reached for her checkbook before Jessica finished the sentence. The new Grace simply looked out the window at her garden. "No, Jessica, I cannot," I said. "Mom, please. We're really struggling right now. I understand that," I said, my voice gentle but entirely unyielding. "But I am no longer your financial safety net. I am your mother. You and Brian make good salaries. You will need to budget for your own car repairs." "Are you going to punish us forever?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "This isn't punishment. This is reality," I told her. "You are welcome to come over for coffee this Sunday. Just you and the boys. We can talk and we can spend time together. But my checkbook is closed and my house is no longer a free service. Let me know if you want to come." I didn't wait for her to argue. I said goodbye and hung up the phone. I didn't know if she would show up on Sunday. I hoped she would. But if she didn't, I knew I would be perfectly fine. I walked into my kitchen, turned on the radio, and began making dinner just for one.